The 100-pound Rottweiler hit the end of his chain so hard, the leather strap jerked taut in Evander Krause's fist like a whip crack, and every person on the floor of the Meridian Grand Casino stopped breathing. Every person except Ada Quinby. She was 20 feet away, holding a tray of complimentary cocktails nobody had ordered, wearing the expression of a woman who had seen considerably worse on a Tuesday night. The dog, massive coal black with rust-colored points, wearing a spiked collar that could have passed for medieval weaponry, had his lips peeled back, showing teeth the size of piano keys. The sound coming out of him vibrated the base of Ada's sternum. The gamblers at the surrounding tables had collectively forgotten about the cards in their hands. The man holding the chain watched her with dark, evaluating eyes. He wanted to see her run. He wanted to see the tray crash, the cocktails fly, the round-faced girl in the too tight uniform scramble backward in a beautiful, satisfying display of terror. That was what Evander Krause was used to. That was what he had built an entire reputation on. What he got instead was Ada Quinby setting the tray calmly down on the nearest table, lowering herself to one knee on the polished marble floor, and holding out one flat open hand, palm down, fingers together, in the direction of his dog. The casino air was kept at a temperature that bordered on hostile, the way Las Vegas always ran the AC in August, fighting the 100-degree night outside its glass walls. Ada felt it on the back of her neck. She was not looking directly at the dog. She was looking at a fixed point just past his left ear, giving him the side of her face, the submissive geometry she'd spent 2 years learning at a K9 training facility in Reno before her knee blew out and ended that chapter permanently. "Easy," she said. Her voice came out low and unhurried, with no question mark at the end. The word landed in the silence like a stone dropped into still water. The Rottweiler hesitated. Evander's grip tightened on the chain. The dog's growl dropped an octave and then stopped entirely. His ears, which had been pinned flat against his skull, swiveled forward. He took one step toward Ada's outstretched hand, then another. His broad, blocky head lowered, and his nose, cold and enormous, pressed into her palm and stayed there. Somebody at a blackjack table let out a shaky breath. Ada reached slowly into the pocket of her uniform jacket and produced a folded square of wax paper. Inside was a piece of steak, plain and unseasoned, left over from the kitchen staff meal she'd eaten standing over a trash can at 9 o'clock because she hadn't had time to sit down. She offered it flat on her palm. The dog took it with surgical gentleness. She scratched him under the jaw, where the spiked collar was clearly digging in. He leaned into it and made a sound that was the complete opposite of everything he'd been doing 30 seconds ago. Ada looked up at Evander Krause for the first time. He was, by most objective measures, a startling-looking man, tall and broad with a jaw like a geological event, wearing a charcoal suit that had not come off any rack, and a watch that probably cost more than Ada's car. His dark blonde hair was pushed back from a face that held no readable expression, which Ada had learned was its own kind of expression. She'd seen that same controlled blankness on handlers, trying not to show the dog they were nervous. "His collar is too tight," she said. "He can't turn his head properly, which means he's been in a constant state of physical discomfort since you put it on him. That's why he's reactive. It isn't aggression, it's pain." The entire casino floor was listening. Evander Krause said nothing for a long moment. His dark eyes moved over her in a way that was not remotely rude, but was absolutely thorough, taking in the extra weight she carried in her hips and her face, the frizz escaping from her regulation bun, the scuff on the right toe of her flat shoe. "What's your name?" he said. "Ada. I'll send your regular server over. There's a private room in the back if you'd prefer." "You," he said, "are my server tonight and going forward." He looked down at his dog, who was now sitting beside Ada's knee with the expression of an animal who had recently discovered religion. "What is your background with dogs?" Evander asked. His accent was light, Eastern European somewhere, softened by what Ada estimated was 15+ years of American English. K9 training, 2 years in Reno. Knee surgery changed the plan. She pushed herself back to standing, which took slightly more effort than she'd have preferred with a room full of people watching. She picked up her tray. "Can I get you something to drink, Mr. Krause?" He studied her for another moment. Some equation she hadn't been aware of him running appeared to resolve itself. "Bourbon," he said, "and sit down. I'm on the clock. Then bring me the bourbon and come back when you're not." She brought him the bourbon. She came back when she wasn't technically working. She stood at the edge of his private alcove for 40 minutes, talking about nothing in particular, the logistics of desensitization training, how Las Vegas compared to other cities, whether the filet here was actually worth the price. She'd told him honestly. Not particularly, while his Rottweiler slept with his heavy head resting on her foot. When she finally walked back to the service station, her manager intercepted her immediately. "Whatever you did," he said, "Krause just called ahead and requested you by name for the next 3 Saturdays." Ada looked at the red mark the collar had left on the dog's neck and thought about the tube of anti-chafe ointment in her work bag. "Tell him I'll only do Saturdays if the dog's collar gets replaced before next weekend," she said. Her manager stared at her. "You want me to tell Evander Krause?" "A padded nylon collar. His dog will be more comfortable. The rest is up to him." The nylon collar arrived by courier 2 days later. It was custom fitted. Ada's name was stitched in small letters on the inside of the band. She chose not to think too hard about that. Over the next 3 weeks, Ada Quinby became a fixed point in the orbit of a very dangerous man, which was not something she had anticipated when she'd taken the floor attendant job 8 months earlier to cover her mother's hospital bills during an insurance fight that had lasted longer than it should have. She hadn't taken the job because she loved it. She'd taken it because the Meridian Grand paid 40% more than the nursing work her credentials could get her right now, and she was tired of being the kind of person who ran the math at midnight and came up short. She was good at it, though, efficient, calm under pressure, and possessed the particular talent of becoming invisible to people who didn't want to see her, which in a casino was most of them. The other attendants on the floor, Kira and Destiny, and a rotating cast of similar figures in identical uniforms, got the whales, the VIP tables, the tips that could cover a car payment. Ada got the overturned drinks and the crying woman in the bathroom stall, and the elderly man who needed someone to call his son because he'd lost more than he'd meant to. She didn't mind, mostly. She had learned young that being underestimated was a particular kind of freedom. What she hadn't learned, because nobody had thought to warn her, was what to do when the most feared man in Las Vegas's shadow economy decided she was the only person in the building worth talking to. Evander Krause was not a gentle man. Ada understood this the way you understand a fact about the physical world, without emotion attached to it. He moved through spaces as if he owned them, which he often did, technically or otherwise. He spoke quietly and directly, with no wasted words, and the people around him responded with a kind of terrified efficiency that was uncomfortable to observe. His underboss, a compact red-haired man named Felix, who wore his suits slightly too large and his expressions slightly too small, followed Evander everywhere and said almost nothing in public. But with Ada, Evander was different. Not soft. Softness wasn't the word. More like present. He asked questions and waited for the full answers. When she told him his Rottweiler needed more off-leash time in low-stimulus environments, he cleared his Thursday afternoons and drove the dog to a private property outside Henderson himself, rather than delegating it. He started eating properly after she commented, once, without particular emphasis, that she'd noticed he'd sent back 2 dinners barely touched, and that she could see it in his face. The look Felix had given her after that comment was the look of a man anticipating an explosion. Evander had picked up his fork and eaten the steak. Kira, at the service station, watched all of this with narrowed eyes. "You're playing a dangerous game," she said one evening. I'm doing my job, Ada said, refilling a water carafe. He doesn't look at you like you're doing your job. Ada didn't answer, because she didn't have one that was entirely honest. The night it turned dangerous started the same way every other shift ended, unremarkably, with an aching knee and the particular exhaustion of someone who had been running on willpower since hour 4. Ada clocked out at 1 a.m, changed in the break room, and pushed through the service exit into the August heat. The parking structure was half a block away, down a service alley with bad lighting and the smell of a city that never fully cooled down. She was halfway through the alley when a man stepped out from between 2 industrial air units. Then a second. Professional. She registered that before anything else, the stance, the deliberate positioning, the way the second man moved to cut off her retreat without looking like that was what he was doing. She had spent 2 years learning how predators moved. These two had done some learning of their own. Ada Quinby, the first one said, Chicago accent, you're going to deliver a message for us. I don't deliver messages, she said. Her heart rate had jumped, but her voice stayed level. She was scanning dumpster to her left, chain link gate to her right, the service door she'd come through already 20 feet behind her. Tell Krause that the Avalon Group has run out of patience. His buffer position in the Henderson accounts transfers by end of month, or his people start having accidents. The man's smile didn't reach anywhere useful. You're the first accident if he doesn't listen. The second man moved toward her. From the darkness at Ada's back came a sound that raised the hair on her arms. Kaiser's bark in an open space was something else entirely, a sustained, resonant detonation that bounced off the concrete walls and filled the alley like a physical presence. The Rottweiler came around the corner at a dead run, and Ada could see Evander 8 steps behind him, moving fast and utterly silent, his face doing something she had never seen it do before. She did not wait. In the second that the 2 men turned toward the dog, because that was the window they'd use, she knew exactly how long a threat response took to redirect. Ada had the heavy, retractable badge reel from her jacket gripped in her fist like a palm strike weight, and she drove her elbow into the first man's face with her full body behind it. He hit the chain-link fence hard and went down. The second man got Kaiser. It was over in approximately 8 seconds. The alley went from chaos to silence the way a switch gets thrown. Evander stood still, staring at her. Both men were on the ground. Kaiser stood between them and Ada with his hackles raised, doing a low, continuous sound from the back of his throat. Not quite a growl and not quite a warning, more like a statement of fact. You hit him, Evander said. You were 8 steps back, Ada said. That was long enough. She looked at her elbow. It would bruise. I did 2 years in a facility where we practiced physical intervention with resistant adults every Thursday morning. I am not entirely without options. He looked at the man on the ground. He looked at her. Something moved behind his expression that she couldn't name. Kaiser fuss, he said quietly. The dog came to his side. Come on. He walked her to her car and leaned against the passenger door with his arms folded while she dug her keys out of a bag. Kaiser sat at his feet and watched her with amber eyes and his tongue hanging out like everything was perfectly fine. The Avalon Group, she said. That's not small. No. How long has this been escalating? A pause. Months. Someone has been giving them information about my schedule, my meetings. He said it with the controlled quiet of a man holding something much larger in check. Someone with close access. Someone who knew which questions to ask. Ada thought about Gina Ferris, about 5 months of break-room sandwiches and easy conversation, about the small, specific questions that had seemed like ordinary curiosity, which nights Evander came in, where he preferred to sit, how long he usually stayed. She had answered all of them without a second thought, because she had relaxed, because she'd believed it was safe to. A cold feeling spread through her chest. Not just the personal betrayal of it. She had been used as a conduit, She'd handed over information without knowing it was information, and now 2 men were on the ground in a Las Vegas alley because of it. "I need to go home," she said. "I'll follow. There will be men outside your building tonight." "Evander," she looked at him directly, "your hand is bleeding." He looked down at his split knuckles, as if he'd genuinely forgotten about them. "I have a first aid kit," she said. Her apartment was small and specific to her in the way that mattered. A reading lamp with a warm yellow shade, a shelf of dog training manuals and anatomy texts, a kitchen her aunt had taught her to use properly. Kaiser identified the couch as the correct location for a dog of his dimensions and settled into it completely, sighing with enormous satisfaction. Ada sat across from Evander on her coffee table, the first aid kit open between them, and took his hand. He let her. "You weren't afraid," he said, "in the alley." "I was afraid," she said, pressing gauze to the split knuckles. "I've had a lot of practice being afraid without showing it. That's not the same thing as bravery. Don't confuse them." He was watching her face, with the same unhurried attention he gave everything. "Who taught you that?" "My mother. She had a chronic illness for about 6 years. Fear was the baseline for a long time. You either learn to function inside it or it takes you." She smoothed a strip of medical tape over the gauze. "I learned to function." The lamp cast a warm circle over both of them. Kaiser's breathing had slowed into sleep on the couch behind her. "Felix confirmed it," Evander said. "Your colleague, Gina Ferris. She has been meeting with an Avalon contact twice a week for 6 weeks. She used what you told her. You didn't know." "No," Ada said. "I know you didn't know." She looked up at him. "What happens to her?" He held her gaze. "Legally, the Avalon contact she's been working with has enough of his own exposure that a conversation with the right federal office will keep everyone's attention pointed elsewhere." He paused. "I have been doing this for 17 years. I have contacts in most things." "I see that." She set down the tape. "What I also see..." She stopped because the next thing was more honest than she usually allowed herself to be out loud. "Tell me," he said. "I see that you're exhausted by it." She kept his eyes. "The whole machine of it. You've been running it so long, you've forgotten it's a machine and not you." Kaiser helped me notice, actually. Dogs don't perform, they reflect. When he started sleeping on your feet instead of guarding the door, I thought, this man hasn't had anything that was just for him in a long time. A silence settled over the apartment, long enough to feel its own weight. "I have lawyers working on a restructure," Evander said. His voice was stripped down to something Ada hadn't heard from him before, not the careful, controlled authority, but something underneath it. Real estate, hospitality. The casino holdings go legitimate by spring. I've been building the framework for 4 months. He paused. "I haven't told Felix." "Why are you telling me?" He didn't answer immediately. When he did, it was simple. "Because I trust you, and because I have not trusted many people in my adult life, and I've learned recently that the absence of it has a specific weight to it, like carrying something you've stopped noticing because it's been there so long." Ada thought about Gina and the break room and the small, ordinary questions, and she understood exactly what he meant. "Go home," she said. "I need to think, but I'd like to keep talking, if that's something you want." He stood, and Kaiser assembled himself at the door with quiet efficiency. Evander paused with his hand on the knob, looked back at her. For a moment he wore the expression of a man who was genuinely uncertain, which she suspected was not a look he wore in front of many people. "About what?" he asked. "Anything," she said. "I don't particularly care." The corner of his mouth moved. It was small. It was real. He left. Kaiser looked back at her once from the doorway with his amber eyes, and Ada, who could read a dog's assessment as clearly as a written report, understood that she had passed some test the animal had been running since the first night in the casino. She didn't quit the Meridian Grand. That would have felt like retreat, and Ada Quinby had not gotten this far by retreating. What changed was everything around her staying mostly the same, while she stopped apologizing for the space she took up in it. She stopped pulling her jacket straight over her hips when she walked the floor. She stopped doing the mental calculation of how she appeared from different angles in different lighting. From the outside, it was a small shift. From the inside, it felt like setting down something she'd been carrying so long she'd stopped registering the weight of it. Gina Ferris was gone by Friday. Ada didn't ask for specifics. The Avalon Group's pressure collapsed over the weeks that followed, loudly, messily, in a way that generated a significant amount of federal paperwork and had nothing traceable back to anyone specific. By November, Evander Krause's name appeared on 3 separate property development entities. The criminal architecture came down in pieces, quietly, the way you demolish a building from the inside. He was not perfect about it. Ada didn't expect perfect. She expected visible effort, consistently applied, and she got it. She saw him on Saturdays, then Thursdays, then on an irregular basis that stopped having a pattern because it didn't need one. Kaiser gained weight on the adjusted diet and developed a habit of occupying whatever couch was nearest, regardless of whose apartment they happened to be in, with the calm authority of an animal who had correctly identified himself as essential to both parties. 6 months later, on a Sunday morning when the Las Vegas light was doing what it did in winter, pale gold and clear in a way the summer heat never allowed, Ada stood in front of a building on the east side of the city that used to be a closed alterations shop, reading the lettering on the newly installed front door. It said Canine Behavioral Services. Below that, smaller Canine Partner Reintegration, Veteran Placement, Working Dog Consulting. The shop was hers. That had happened after a negotiation she'd won by simply refusing the first 4 counteroffers and being willing to wait, which it turned out was the only leverage you ever actually needed. Evander had provided the startup capital in the form of a documented business loan with an enforceable repayment schedule, because Ada had not gotten this far by accepting things she couldn't stand fully behind. She felt a warm weight press against the outside of her knee. Kaiser had his enormous head tilted up at her, ears forward, tail moving in its slow and certain way. Evander came to stand beside her, hands in his pockets, a dark jacket instead of a suit, which had become more common lately. He looked at the sign the same way he looked at everything, fully, without hurry. "How does it feel?" he asked. Ada thought about the break room sandwiches, and the alley, and the parking structure, and the first aid kit, and every version of herself that had existed before this one. "Like something that belongs to me," she said. He reached over and took her hand, and she let him. And Kaiser sat down on both of their feet simultaneously with a deep, contented sigh. 100 pounds of warm certainty, entirely satisfied with the arrangement he'd had a hand in building from the very first night. The morning light asked nothing of any of them. They stood in it for a while.